sampai bila balik tu I pening. Oh.
Itu harus saya daya aku. Oh, gitu.
Oh, memang pening. But okay lah. We were so happy it was okay. Okay. Yeah.
You MC seorang kan?
MC
Jadi
seorang.
mic ni boleh guna lah.
Boleh?
Q&A.
Boleh.
Okay, boleh.
Bawa. Boleh. Satu saja. Kan. Ni boleh bawa ke sana lah. Boleh bawa ke sebelah sana tu. Tak center sana. This one ni bawa ini.
Test.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I hope everyone has enjoyed the tea break earlier, and I believe that all of us are ready for our first keynote speech this morning. For that, I would like to invite our first keynote speaker, Professor Emeritus Dr. Ibrahim Ahmad Bajunid, the President of Malaysian Society for Educational Administration and Management, MSIM, accompanied by the moderator, Dr. Rahima Adam, Examination Syndicate of Malaysia, Ministry of Education Malaysia on stage to begin our first keynote speech. Please welcome.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning to everyone present here today. Welcome to the first keynote session at the International Conference on the Future of Education 2018. It is a great honor and also pleasure for us to have Professor Emeritus Dr. Ibrahim Ahmad Bajunid as our first keynote speaker. The title of his keynote is The Future of Education, of Human Consciousness and the History of Tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Emeritus Dr. Ibrahim Ahmad Bajunid is the President of the Malaysian Association for Education, MAE, and Director of IAB Global. He was the Vice Chancellor in Laureate International Universities and also Professor of Management, Education, and the Social Sciences. He was the Director of the Regional Center for Educational Planning, United Arab Emirates, Professor of Management, Leadership, and Policy Studies, and the founding Dean, Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences at University Tun Abdul Razak, UNITA, and also former Director of Institute Aminuddin Baki, which is the National Institute of Educational Management and Leadership. He is a distinguished Fellow Institute of Strategic and International Studies, Distinguished Associate of the Institute of Educational Leadership, Consultant, Center for Civilization Dialogue, University of Malaya, and Senior Fellow, University Islam Malaysia. For more than 3 decades, he has been the key figure in the field of educational management and leadership in Malaysia. In other words, he is a person who has a great passion for lifelong learning and also lifelong contributions. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome Professor Emeritus Dr. Ibrahim Ahmad Bajunid.
Dr. Chairperson, Master of Ceremonies. You know, today is a special day as many, many other days are special days for each of us, if we assign the meaning of something special to that particular day or that particular occasion. When we turn up for conferences like this, our turning up should be happy occasions, not sad occasions. Don't get involved in quarrels, but get involved in appreciating each other and pushing our understanding to a higher level, understanding perspectives from different levels. You see, each of us would have our own stories, our own narratives, and all these narratives are very, very meaningful. For instance, I have a narrative traveling with the chairperson in Germany and Russia, elsewhere, but that was because of the initiative of Dr. Sazali. Dr. Sazali, before, on his own, he financed himself to attend conferences. And later, he mobilized groups to visit various countries to understand the educational system. And Dr. Sazali, he didn't do comparative education formally, but he understands comparative education. We cannot jump on the bandwagon of changes heralded, pushed, driven by other people. We have to understand the nature of change. We have to understand culture and context and history and principles. We have to understand that. A top comparative educationist in the early 1900s, Sadler, he said something like this: you cannot go to another country and to the garden of the country to pick a flower or a bush from somewhere and come back and replant whatever you pick from somewhere else in your own context. You cannot do that, not in education. But education, educational thought, comparative education has been marginalized. The University of Malaya in the 1960s, they taught, there was a program on comparative education, which later became international education, global education, etc. But it lost the principles of education, the heart of education, the nucleus of what education is, has gone away because the business people and the politicians come into the picture, and they would be, right now, everywhere around the world, they're talking about Industrial Revolution 4.0. But Industrial Revolution 4.0 is nothing new. Educators should always be ahead of their times. So when we're talking about the future, we're talking about the history of tomorrow. People always talk about history as something past, something gone. But so much of history, it overlaps between science and fiction. For those who are fans of James Bond movies, every one of the gadgets and many of the so-called scientific fiction, they are all real in today's world. But many, many years ago, they were not real. When we were in the universities, the cleverest of students in the universities never believed that we could have handphone, because the movies those days were Get Smart. And the hero with the heroine used to take their shoes and then speak on the phone. But all the top university students in the sciences, in engineering, in every faculty didn't believe that. And we laughed because our mindset was locked on the notion that the phone must be on the wall with wires. We were not ready for the future. There are many, many other examples. So, when we turn up in conferences, we should have open minds to pick up ideas. We should be on the quest for ideas, and we build those ideas in our minds, where we will have the opportunity to reject some of our intellectual baggage and to acquire new perspectives of realities. But in order to do that, we have to understand continuity and change. We have to understand the nature of something continuous, but then where it is discontinuous. Whether it is continuous or discontinuous, change is there. Change will always be there. I'm so happy today because two of my colleagues, Dr. Sazali, interesting story, interesting narratives, and Dr. Mahinda, fantastic stories, fantastic memories. For instance, Dr. Mahinda, he was in the National Institute of Educational Management and Leadership. He was one of the influencers, leaders if you like, drivers if you like, who push the institute to formulate the program of national qualification for NPQH, National Professional Qualifications for head teachers, which then became National Professional Qualifications for educators. And there were many, many other things he did, which he has been doing. Right now, he's the director in the sports division. Dr. Sazali, I was the director of the UNESCO Regional Center for Educational Planning, and he kept contacting me to rejuvenate, reactivate MSEAM, which we founded in the 1990s when we had the biggest international conference, the Commonwealth Council of Educational Administration and Management Conference. We had it in 1995. That's when we formed MSEAM, Malaysian Society for Educational Administration and Management. He's the secretary. He wears two hats today. He is the director of the Tuanku Bainun Institute, but he's also the secretary of MSEAM. Now, Dr. Mahinda said that this kind of program must go on. Dr. Sazali will retire soon. That's tomorrow. That's the history of tomorrow. We already know the history of tomorrow, that he's going to retire, because we have prior knowledge. Now, Dr. Mahinda said, when he retires, will Tuanku Bainun and the Teachers Institute still continue this program? Here's the problem. Here is the problem. You see, it's territoriality. It is leadership-based because we fail to understand something very important. We fail to understand professionalism. They were in the National Institute of Educational Management and Leadership, and they have been in different divisions. But they are still the same because they are professionals. Professionals, and there are many conferences like this throughout the world, professionals will carry their professionality and their professionalism in any of the professional conferences anywhere in the world. I have so many friends from different countries, and when I meet them, we would be able to have a similar collective professional memory. We would refer to the works, to the seminal works of Jerome Bruner, of Howard Gardner, and of many, many other scholars. And we will be on the same page in discussing because we have the same mental understanding and conceptual understanding of the works that we have had access to. Why? Because we're not just teachers. We are professionals. Let me put it another way. You are a member of a political party. Can you bring your political party with its narrow agenda anywhere in the world? Your political party will not be accepted anywhere in the world because it's only accepted in that narrow context of your country and your agenda. But when you are a professional, whether you're a lawyer, a doctor, a teacher, you can bring your profession and you can be part of the professional dialogue and discourse anywhere in the world. However, it's a long way forward. However, you really have to understand that teaching is a profession and really believe that teaching is a profession and not a semi-profession. Teaching is regarded as low-level semi-profession. It's a long way to struggle to ensure that teaching is a true, noble profession, and we are as professional as the lawyers and the doctors and the architects, etc. But we have a problem in our midst. In the Malaysian context, no teacher, no person can go to a school in Malaysia and teach. Nobody by law without a certificate or a diploma in education can go to the classroom in Malaysia. However, in our 75 universities, nearly 100,000 lecturers, 90,000 lecturers, they can just go into the lecture rooms and lecture without, in Malaysia. In some countries, no. In some other countries, people who teach in higher education must have certificate or diploma in teaching in higher education, but not in Malaysia. They can just teach without the formal training. And what is more interesting now, if you are open to follow the discussions, the conversations, the debates about what should be happening in the universities and in the schools, the debates are monopolized by those in higher education, by the engineers. The engineers say that they are the drivers of outcome-based education. And so also other people in academia, they are now the champions of what education should be. And teachers at school level have lost out. Because we have this tradition. One time, a long time ago, we said that in order to teach the primary school, 6 years, you only have to have 3 years of secondary school education, and that's it. That's all. All those changed when we had the knowledge economy. The knowledge economy drove the idea of the knowledge worker. And out there, in all other sectors, people were advancing their understanding, their knowledge, skills, attitudes, and they move on. And that was the point when the Ministry of Education Malaysia decided that every teacher at secondary level will have a university degree by 2010. And all other teachers, and there are 480,000 of them in Malaysia, the figures change, but if we were to include states, not the federal level, there are more than 500,000 teachers. Now, all other teachers are supposed to have university degrees, not just secondary school teachers. And we are about to achieve that fully. But then, teachers remain second-class intellectuals because the university people think that they are better. They are better qualified. They teach at higher levels, etc. And they forget that the primary level, the kindergarten level, is equally, if not more important. So, what do? MESIAM and another association, the Malaysian Association for Education, the oldest professional association in Malaysia, 50 years old, over. We are advocating that every teacher continue to pursue higher education, not just a first degree, but the master's degree and the doctoral degree, so that teachers in the profession, that the profession of teaching is not any less than those in academia. But that idea is so difficult to be accepted by policymakers, because policymakers, especially politicians, are only interested in the political mileage during their time. And this raises the question of who are going to champion that for the 35 years that teachers are going to be in the system, they're not going to be static like before, only with the O-level certification or only with the first degree. Are they not going to continue to learn life as a lifelong, continuous professional development, whether you get a degree or otherwise? But who would champion this? So far, our trade unions in Malaysia have not championed this. But our professional associations are championing this. So that's my first point. It's about professionalism. It's about profession, professionalism, professionality. Now, I like to refer to what Dr. Mahinda mentioned about the book, the way schools work, and the 4 approaches to educational policies, educational principles. But I like to refer to that by referring, this time not like the maxim by Sadler, the comparative educationist, but this time to a philosopher in American education. Very interesting 2 books. One is by Theodore Bremelt, and another one by Colin Powers. Colin Powers, he was the director of UNESCO. He just wrote the book, his memoirs on the power of education. Bremel wrote the book, Education as Power. Among other things that Bremel wrote, and Dr. Mahinda, I'm just making the comparisons, And I'm also saying each time we attend a conference, we should add on, build to what we already have. So that's where I'm bringing this into the picture. Bramall says that in American history and American tradition, first there is essentialism. Essentialism is when the society wants the school system to transmit the knowledge worth knowing, the culture worth knowing. So that's essentialism. The second is perennialism. Perennialism is you transmit the best of the Greco-Roman Judaic Christian tradition. That is perennialism. And then it is reconstructionism, where you reconstruct the educational system. You construct the educational system because of the challenges of Industrial Revolution 4.0 or education for all of the Millennium Development Goals, whatever. And there's another element, progressivism. Now, progressivism is changing the education system to ensure that we are progressing. The question is, when pressure groups, when interest groups, when politicians want to tinker with the education system, do they have an understanding of education? Do they understand education deeply, intimately? Dr. Mahinda was with me just now. He was saying, he was telling about his daughter, very intimate, how his daughter is growing. And his daughter asked him so many times, why must I go to school? What is school for? Etc. And he asked his daughter to explain why she must go to school. And there's this great conversation. Because one of the foundations of values and thought processes is conversation, extended conversation. The question is, when people are in schools and in universities for 4 years, 5 years or more, do they have any opportunity to have an extended conversation with their tutor or lecturer for half an hour? In schools, during the 11 years or 12 years of schooling, do children have extended conversations? This leads me to the challenges of education are actually, it's not just contents and methods and processes. It's also about the structure of the knowledge, the structure of the knowledge of each of our disciplines. And it is also, and I share this with you, it is also about signature pedagogy. You see, there are general pedagogies, but there are discipline-specific pedagogies. But if you're a professional and your professionality, you have your professionality, you understand yourself, there is self-knowledge, there is personal knowledge. Self-knowledge is knowledge about yourself. Personal knowledge is what you know about what you know. It's a cognition of cognition, is the knowing about knowing. Now, knowing yourself, what is your pedagogical signature? What is your pedagogical signature? You can have many pedagogical signatures. I'm signing your certificates. I actually have different signatures for different kinds of things. So even for teaching, we can have different pedagogical and andragogical signatures in different contexts. So, intimate understanding has to be based on knowledge. It has to be based on seminal works. I didn't carry the book today, but I go around saying that anybody in Malaysia who wants to talk about education in Malaysia, we have the right to talk about education. Everybody has the right to talk about education. But when we want to intervene, to influence, to change our system, we must read, among other books, the book with the late Professor Hussein Ahmad. The title of the book, The Mission of Public Education. The Mission of Public Education. The transformation of society. Ministers of education, the cabinet, parliamentarians should not talk about education if they don't read that book. I'm taking a stand. You shouldn't just go and talk about education without understanding education deeply. What you think you know about education from your experiences as students or those in the profession will be limited. We have to know more, and we have to know more. That's why at the global level we have all kinds of programs, the latest being Education for All. Now we are about education for sustainable development. What does sustainable development mean in our classroom? What does sustainable development mean in our national education system? And what is it that we know about tomorrow which will force us to change our today? I mentioned earlier that most of the things we are talking about today, which seem to be new, have actually already been discussed by educators of yesteryears and by futurists of yesteryears. There are so many futurists, those who focus on studying the future, including the future of education from a long time ago. They include people like Herman Kahn, Alvin Toffler of Future Shock, and many others. If we want to talk about the future, but we don't want to explore the brilliance of those who have studied the future, then we are missing out. We are missing out. In his book, Alvin Toffler, in his book, Future Shock, among other things, he said, FFRI, Future Focused Role Imagery. Future Focused Role Imaginary. You know, we can criticize America for all kinds of things, but one of the good programs in their system is the Common Core Curriculum. One of the other good programs, this is by Arthur Koster and Bena Kalik, is about the habits of mind. The habits of mind. Do we know our habits of mind? Do we know our habits of mind in our family, in our subculture, in our political culture, in our national culture? In what ways are our habits of mind preventing us from achieving our fullest potentialities? So there's this habit of mind, and then there's another writer, very exciting writer, Alan Langer. And we have invited them. By the way, they have come to Malaysia. We have invited them to present papers in conferences like this, and we have interacted with them. Alan Langer speaks about mindfulness and mindlessness. Her book is Mindfulness. Mindfulness is about seeing everything from a single perspective. Mindlessness is also about being trapped in categories, black and white, but nothing in between. Mindlessness is also about acting automatically. We just react, because we're mindless. So we have the self-examined life, the reflective professional can achieve much, much more than what we are achieving. But we have to go to the next level of understanding and exploring our self-knowledge and our knowledge of knowledge itself, and our knowledge of education and what education means. So in Malaysia, because we are very centralized, whatever comes from the ministry normally comes from the minister, normally comes from the advisors of the minister, normally comes from someone somewhere who has a passion to influence the ministry, and then it goes down, and the whole system is supposed to follow through. One case in point is outcome-based education. Another case in point is people are now enamored, they're in love with Industrial Revolution 4.0. Industrial Revolution 4.0. What about Education Revolution 4.0? Where is Education Revolution 4.0? Where is Education Revolution 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, and now Education Revolution 4.0? Actually, we can find many turning points in the education revolution when we look at over 1,000 years of the development of educational thoughts and educational ideas. For instance, one turning point was the contributions by Jean Piaget. Another turning point is that almost most of the exam systems of the world at one point of time, and even now, they use Bloom's taxonomy and Kraftwerk's et al. Taxonomy to measure people. And at one point of time, our understanding of intelligence was general intelligence and specific intelligence. But it was Howard Gardner and his team, like Dr. Sazali and his team, like Dr. Mahinder and his team and others. It was Howard Gardner in Project Zero in Harvard University who stayed the course of their research for so many years, and he came with multiple intelligences. And multiple intelligences is a turning point. Is a turning point in our understanding of intelligence globally. And Howard Gardner went on to write, among other things, 5 minds for the future. 5 minds for the future. The disciplined mind, the synthesizing mind, the creative mind, the ethical mind, and then the respectful mind. Everywhere we now have hate mongers. We have politicians, religious people, school teachers, principals who are bigoted. And they are extreme in so many ways. And we find them in our midst. We find them in the political milieu. We find them in education. We find them in business. They miss out on the respectful mind. They don't respect the other being. They're not ethical in so many ways. But let's take not respecting the other being as part of the future mind. All these fanatics and extremists and bigoted people, people who hate people, you know, there's the song, people who love people are the most wonderful people in the world. We should be propagating, the noble profession of education should be propagating harmony and peace and loving other people. We already communicated. She told me she'll alert me 5 minutes beforehand, and we were saying, I cannot stop when I have the mic. But even when I don't have the mic, I don't stop, because we must share. It is so very important for us. It is so very important for us to promote peace and love, and to get man to be the best of what mankind can be, and not the worst. But one precondition is to respect other beings. For example, you attack people of other race, other religion, other whatever, and then you yourself or the loved ones in your family get involved in a tragedy, and you need blood transfusion, or you need an organ transplant. Are you going to not want the blood because it's from someone who's an infidel, or someone from a different race, and you don't want the heart transplant? So the question is, which is more important? You're just being a teacher, or you being a professional? Which is more important? Love for the country and love for humanity, or love for your political party? Which is more important? Surrendering to some bigoted, toxic leaders, or celebrating the sages of all time and the scholars of all time? So these are questions we are not raising in our classrooms, but these are the questions we must raise incidentally or systematically. But then in order to do that, we have to have that encyclopedic repertoire of what the philosophies of education are, the principles of education are, the policies and practices of education are. And then we can become better human beings. A conference is always a conversation. You just had a little conversation with me, but it's a monologue rather than a conversation. But that's the best we can do for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. We will now open the question and answer session. So please kindly state your name and also your affiliation before posting the questions. Any questions from the floor? Yes, please. Please go to the nearest microphone to post your question. Somebody has to switch it on. Somebody has to switch it on.
No? Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Zayana Yuliasi from Indonesia. Prof, how the picture future education within 10 years in order to education not misden progress technology and will be preservation of characteristics human life. Thank you.
For the technology. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for the question. All right. We go to the next question. We will take 3 questions before Prof will answer all the 3 questions. All right. Please.
Thank you, Professor. I'm also emeritus professor, teaching for last 65 years. You spoke very well. I'm very impressed. What is the future of the education? Are we making progress? Are we going in circle? Are we changing, evolution, revolution? I reflect as a scientist and a philosopher, where are we going? I'm from Australia. We have gone through last 50 years, so many changes. And sometimes I wonder, are we doing change for the sake of changing or making progress? Sometimes, philosophically, I think we are going in circle. I'm a scientist. You mentioned about science, technology, history, other things. So I think as a scientist, I analyze your speech. I'm very impressed. You speak very well. But then I say, what is the future? In your country, I came from India, but I have been in America, Australia, and everywhere for the last 50 years. What I find, education now, I'm very critical for people with money. From your country, so many students go to Australia because it is cheaper than England and America. I was teaching in long time ago. I feel like a dinosaur. I feel like I'm 83 only, but we had students coming from your country all around Asian. I had when they came to our country in Australia, they were taught English for 1 year. Now, the language problem, I've been away for 50 years, but I still speak with my Indian accent. I can't lose it. Anyway, so what I'm saying that, what is the future? Is there a future for average person? Future for people very rich? I've been here to this place for 5th conference. In my life, I've attended 150 conferences. I feel sometimes that I'm getting a bit senile. I'm critical. And I talked to one of my colleagues. He's a very learned man. I won't tell his name, but he said he also losing his memory a little bit. He's only 60. So what I'm saying that, is there any future? Future for poor people. I come from India. Last year I was here for last. I met Director General that time. He said his son is studying in Australia. Very good. I bought a house for him for $2 million. Very good. Why do you send him to Australia, America? Our standard is not so good. So why don't we improve our standard? Why we look for foreigners? The foreigners, they don't understand our language, our culture. I am not beating I was consultant in Philippines, I was consultant in Indonesia, I was consultant in Pakistan. What I found that people from different culture, very knowledgeable, but they don't understand our culture. We have to learn from them, but modify it to suit our culture.
All right, thank you very much, Professor.
Yeah,
all right, so 83 is still much younger than our Prime Minister, who is actually celebrating his 93rd birthday today. All right, the final question, or do we have 2 questions? So let him, he's the last person to ask question.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, Dr. Fazli.
No.
Thank you very much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I'm Dr. Aftab Alam from Pakistan. My dear doctor, your speech is very impressive. I really like it. I have a short question. You talked about respecting and loving others. Please clarify the meaning of salat. Is it the same one?
Oh, salam. All right, thank you very much for the question. So now, is there another question?
Mine.
Oh, from you. All right, okay. 2 more. Okay, we will entertain the questions. All right, please proceed.
Thank you, Moderator. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And good morning to every of you. My name is Abdul Muiz. I come from University of Malaysia, Sabah. My question is very simple. When we discuss the future of education, the future of education means the changes in education policy, because years back we have witnessed various series of changes of education. And we might see it again, especially when the MOE is now under the new minister, which appears to be one of my teachers actually at the International Islamic University. So to be clear, the question is, with the future of education means the changes of education policy in the future? If yes, why? If no, so why? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we go to the final question from our gentleman here.
Okay, I am Devan Rajaram, School Improvement Partner from PPD Hilepera. Prof, very good morning, and to the audience, very good morning. I've always loved your speeches, Prof, and the one that you gave in the 2015 ELTC conference I actually transcribed, where you spoke about coordinate bilinguals of you and Dr. Mate and all. All right. My question today for you, Prof, is you mentioned that educators should be ahead of their time. I just want your opinion as to how far ahead of our time our Malaysian education development blueprint is. It's just that question. In your opinion, how far ahead of our time is the blueprint? Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that questions, now we would like a professor to address the questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You know, when you're speaking publicly, you're taking all kinds of risks. People viral all kinds of things. So, but then you have to tell the truth, because among the core values that we should uphold would be truth, justice, equality, freedom and liberty, goodness and beauty. And truth is beauty. The poet John Keats said, beauty is truth. Truth is beauty. That's all you need to know. So we must speak the truth. My own understanding of the blueprint, and I was involved in many meetings regarding that, is that it's nothing new. McKinsey helped us give the global perspective. But most of the things in the blueprint were already mastered by people who work in the educational planning and research unit all their lives. And one of the persons, well, she herself, and one of the persons is the late Professor Hussein, who wrote that book. His whole life was devoted to it. Professor Hussein was educated with the former Director General in Brinsford. He came back, he was a headmaster, he was a school teacher, he was in Bureau Tata Negara, he was a professor in University of Science Malaysia, he was in the Curriculum Development Center, he was in Institute Aminuddin Baki, he was in University of Malaya, etc., etc. He wrote his book. You see, universities typically, people who are new, you know, they get their master's doctorate in the universities, but they have no other work experience except in academia, and they are very critical about everything else. And actually, they are critical because they don't understand that there is another genre, another way of doing research. And that genre is known as appreciative inquiry. You inquire, but you are appreciative. I was with the Ministry of Education. I saw how my friends, my colleagues worked day and night, and I saw how the government allocated billions to try to improve our educational system. And then there will come some university people who will be criticizing everything without understanding all the sacrifices made over the years. So the blueprint, many people were involved in it before McKinsey came. The blueprint is very useful for us to move forward. We put things together, we organize things systematically. So the blueprint is important, but it is only a milestone in our development. Whenever we have blueprints, programs, everything by the government, we should be positive and take them, because the government has spent millions and millions to come out with those frameworks, frames of ideas. So at our level, various levels, we should recognize and accept the governing ideas and use that as a landmark, as our benchmark. And so where we are located in any institution, we align our personal vision, our goals, objectives, etc., with those national visions. And we must not forget, we also have the global vision, education for all, sustainable education, lifelong learning. These were the broad global ideas which can come in. But the problem is, when we don't align ourselves, when we are on the mode where we criticize everything, we find everything so difficult. We find things difficult because we have not developed the techniques of embracing ideas which are not from us, but from somewhere else. And when we embrace those ideas, we ensure that they are relevant indigenously, relevant to our history, our culture, our context, and our immediate realities, as well as our aspirations. I want to answer the other questions simultaneously, and my professor emeritus friend from India, thank you very much for your contribution. There was a TV program last night when somebody was saying that in Malaysia, when people retire, if they want to continue, we must create the supportive group to allow them to continue. Otherwise, we'll lose the brilliance and the experience and wisdom of people like your good self, like my beloved Dr. Sazali and Mahinda. They're going to retire soon. And once they retire, you're supposed to not support their contributions. That is something which is wrong with governments. They don't have the wisdom to see the possibilities of contribution by people like your good self. In America, some time ago, and I was inspired by it, America has this program, SFAA, Science for All Americans. So I changed it, Science for All Malaysians. And when our present Prime Minister was chairing a meeting some time ago, I raised this. This is when he was the fourth Prime Minister. But then there was someone then who said, oh, we are doing it. And later on, many years later on, I met this person. I said, you know, during that meeting, because among other things, I was suggesting not just establishing museums, but establishing science museum. Because our Prime Minister had gone to Boston and seen Children's Science Museum. And so I was saying, we must have science museums throughout the country, however small, because we must develop scientific literacy, not just religious literacy, but scientific literacy among all Malaysians. I've just written an article, and I was discussing with our lecturer on jurisprudence from UiTM, Ms. Mariam Abdullah. In the article submitted to her faculty, I suggested, just like education for all, legal literacy for all. Legal literacy for all, beginning with legal literacy for teachers' colleges. The 500,000 teachers in the country must be legally literate. Because legal literacy means your mind is about mindfulness. It's understanding both sides of the arguments. It is understanding the principles which are legal principles, which uphold justice. But then, the Faculty of Law cannot do it alone. Educators must come on board to help develop the curriculum and to champion legal literacy for all. Like scientific and technological literacy for all. We have much work to do in curriculum development. But then we have to analyze our problems. But our analysis must be accurate, must be rational. But if we analyze whatever is happening, if we analyze wrongly, then the solutions will not be very good. And as we develop the art of analyzing problems, we must generate elegant solutions. Our problems are we're not generating elegant solutions, but generating elegant solutions must be right across from the classroom to the highest level. And just to be fair to the rest to answer, there's this person. There are many people like yourself searching for answers. But there's this person, Yuval Noah Harari. You can go and buy the book. It's worth it. It's about 60-something ringgit. He wrote the book Sapiens, Human Beings. And then he wrote an interesting book, Homo Deus, The History of Tomorrow. And he ended by saying this. This is the end of his book. He says, everywhere in the world, it is about big data. People are collecting data. Zuckerberg got into trouble because they are collecting data. And the issue now, artificial intelligence, algorithm, the machine, whatever, algorithm, they know more about us than we know more about ourselves. Let me repeat. Artificial machines, artificial intelligence know more about us, every one of us, than we know about ourselves. So his question is, and I'm answering all those, his question is, which is more important? Algorithm, the mechanics of education, all the certificates and all, or human consciousness? Human consciousness. Artificial intelligence is without conscience, without consciousness. No consciousness. Artificial intelligence. But human intelligence is about consciousness. And consciousness is also about conscience. So these are things that educators have to grapple with. Very important questions, and we have to search for answers to all this. And there are many people who are searching for answers, and we must be open to the outside world. Our mindsets must not be such. If it is written by someone from a different religion, from a different race, from a different country, from a different language, then we reject all those. If we do that, then we are determined to shortchange our future generations. We must have an open mindset to move forward, not just for our own people, but for humanity. And these are all important questions. Carry on raising those questions, because my professor said a long time ago, and I knew it, the people who ask the questions are the intelligent people. That's why, you know, when you do your doctorate, it's always the problem, the research problem. So when you ask the questions, you're cleverer than the people who answer the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor, for the explanation and also clarification to all the questions. Thank you very much for such an enlightening and also thought-provoking keynote speech. And thank you to everyone here today for being such an attentive audience. Now, I think what we can conclude here is that no matter how the future education is going to be, we as individuals, we have to play our roles in order for us to prepare the generation to be human beings, so that they can survive in the future no matter what comes in their ways.
And to be fair to the organizers, they asked me to prepare the slides. They asked me to prepare, so I prepared. But you see, you have to be mindful. Just because you prepare doesn't mean you have to show. But you have to But there are some valuable things here. But there is something which is happening in academia which is not right. The moment we have all these PowerPoint professors and PowerPoint slides, we are not thinking deeply because we are not writing real research papers. We are just putting all these PowerPoint things, you know, and we become PowerPoint professors, not deep enough. You see, they can be interesting sometimes, but the interaction is more interesting. Thank you.
All right, with that, we end the session, the keynote speech session today, and we hand over the session to the MCs. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rahima Adam, for moderating this session, and to our distinguished keynote speaker, Professor Emeritus Dr. Ibrahim Ahmad Bajunid, the President of MSIM, for an informative and enlightening speech. Dr. Rahima and Yang Berbahagia Dato are requested to remain on stage for the memento presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage Dr. Mihander Singh, Director of Sports Division, Ministry of Education, Malaysia, to present a memento to Yang Berbahagia Professor Emeritus Dato Dr. Ibrahim Ahmad Bajunid. Thank you so much, Dr. Mihander Singh, for giving away the memento. In a short while, we'll be listening to the second keynote speaker.
Ladies and gentlemen, we shall now proceed with our second keynote speech. So without further ado, please help me to welcome Professor Pradeep Khanna, CEO of Global Mindset Sydney, Australia, accompanied by the moderator of this session, Associate Professor Dr. Shahri Abdul Rahman, Dean Faculty of Education, Al Madinah International University, on stage for our second keynote speech.
Thank you, Madam Ceremony. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning. Our next presentation will be presented by Professor Pradeep Khanna. And before he presents his paper, allow me to read a brief biodata given by the organizing committee. Pradeep Khanna is a CEO of Sydney-based consulting company, Global Mindset, focused on leveraging globalization, digitalization, and virtualization for living, learning, and working. He is Sydney Chapter President and Global Co-Chair of Education for the Global Virtual Reality Augmented Reality Association, and is also founding member of the ICEE, ICICCL Mixed Reality. I hope Dr. Pradeep will go through with you with all the acronyms I must admit that I'm alien to those acronyms. Mixed Reality for Learning and Performance Augmentation, SIG, and he has 30 years of executive experience. Dr. Pradeep has been a leader for IBM GBS, Australia, New Zealand, leveraging India, China, Philippines, Vietnam, Egypt, Romania, Brazil, and Argentina. He is also the adjunct professor in Australia, Singapore, India, and a speaker at international conferences including Kuala Lumpur, Singapore, San Diego, Beijing, Melbourne, and New Delhi. Dr. Pradeep is advisory board of a number of companies. He has his MBA from AGSM, Master of Science in Computer Science from UTS, and Bachelor of Technology from IIT New Delhi. He will be talking about virtual, augmented, and mixed reality education for the next 40 minutes or so. And at the end of his presentation, he will be also taking some questions from the floor. And I hope to meet the target that we are to stop at 1. Ladies and gentlemen, without much ado, please welcome Professor Pradeep Khanna.
Thank you very much. After a very interesting session by Datuk Ibrahim, let's have a much more interactive session. So let me ask the audience first, who has experienced virtual reality or augmented reality? A show of hands, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wow. Another question, who can explain the difference between virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality? Anybody? Blended learning. That's an analogy, and I'll come to that, but that doesn't really explain what is virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality. Okay, I've now got a feel for what the audience is, and let me first take out some of these golden colored. Now, what do these have? They'll get a packet of Tim Tams from Australia. They are real objects, they're not virtual objects. Now, why I have got them with me is, I will be asking certain questions, and these will be handed out to the audience as prizes to whoever gives the right answer. Can I have my presentation, please? Who's got my presentation? My presentation, my slide, PowerPoint.
Oh, yeah. PowerPoint slides?
While they load it up, let me get the first question rolling. When did the first wedding take place in virtual reality? I want a year and a month, as well as the country. So 3 questions, and you've got to answer all 3 correctly. Otherwise, you have to give me a box of Tim Tams. Come on, guys. Which year was the first wedding in virtual reality? Make a guess. Okay, I'll give you a hint. It was in the year 2017. It was in San Francisco. Which month was it? Who said what? June. Incorrect. Next. January. Incorrect. Or I'll say higher. May. Your name, please? Yes, you are 100% right. Wow. Your name? Please come up and take your prize. Wow. That is excellent. I speak at conferences all over the world. This is the first time somebody has got it right. Oh my God! Then I've got to get, I love that. Okay, question number 2. What is the longest time spent in virtual reality environment? Is it 1 year? Is it 1 hour? What is the Guinness Book of Records for the longest time in virtual reality? There's another packet of Tim Tams going. Come on, guys. You have Googled it, but you are spot on. It is 36 hours, 2 minutes. Please, your name, please. Come and get your prize. So has anybody been able to locate my presentation? This was question number 1. Last question before we get on to the actual session. Which university and which country was an admission letter issued with augmented reality? I'll give you a hint. It was in Asia. So, which country? Who said? India? Incorrect. Singapore? Incorrect. China? Who said China? You're absolutely right. Your name, please. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
So it was Northwestern Polytechnic University in China, which had a QR code in its admissions letter when it sent out the admission letter to the students. And when you scan the QR code, you got a virtual tour of the campus. So now let's look at what are we talking about? What are these acronyms, virtual reality, augmented reality, and so on and so forth? And this beautiful lady over here did give a hint of an analogy called blended learning. Let me kind of give you an analogy in the learning environment which all of you will correlate with. On one hand, you have face-to-face classes where there are real people sitting who are interacting with each other. Just like that, you define reality where you've got real objects, real people. So just think about it. You've got face-to-face classes, you've got reality. On the other hand, go to complete online learning. What is online learning? You are engaging in a digital platform. Just like that, you've got virtual reality, which is created in a digital environment. And the spectrum, as you go from face-to-face to online learning, is called blended learning. Likewise, as you go from reality to virtual reality, the spectrum is called mixed reality. And as you go from reality to virtual reality, you keep on adding virtual objects. Stage 1 is called augmented reality. And it's augmenting the reality with virtual objects. Stage 2 is, as you increase the level of virtual objects, it's called augmented virtuality. And finally, when you reach a completely virtual environment, that's called virtual reality. So now, have a look at this spectrum. this chart over here shows on the extreme left-hand side is the reality or real objects. On the extreme right-hand side is virtual reality, and in between you've got various steps where you're augmenting reality with virtual objects. And you look at phases of augmented reality as well as augmented virtuality. Let me also kind of run you with some of the common companies who are operating in this spectrum. Virtual reality, you've got 3 major companies operating, actually 4 major companies operating in this spectrum. You've got HTC Vive, which is a subsidiary of the telecom company HTC. That is a typical version of desktop virtual reality. Why? Because the head-mounted device that you use has to be used in conjunction with a laptop or a desktop. That is one end of absolutely best quality virtual reality. Side by side to HTC, you've got Oculus. Oculus is a company owned by Facebook. It is also an example of desktop virtual reality. And just like HTC, it also requires a laptop or a desktop to work with, and it gives equally quality of virtual reality which is as good as HTC. At the bottom end of the spectrum, you have Samsung, which has got a product called Samsung Gear VR. That head-mounted device costs $100 US. You can use your Android phone for getting a virtual reality experience. So you've got a range of virtual reality experiences, right from Samsung Gear, which is about $100, to HTC or Oculus experiences, where the hardware alone will cost you about $2,000. When you look at augmented reality, you've got HoloLens, Microsoft as the major player at the moment in augmented reality. You've got companies like Apple, Samsung, Sony. Every major company of the world is today putting in patents for augmented reality devices. But they are still in development mode. So this is where the spectrum looks like. This is what different companies operating in this spectrum are. Augmented reality and virtual reality have been around for quite some time. So it's time for another round of Tim Tams. So when was the first head-mounted device built? Which year was it? All of you understand when I talk about head-mounted device? It's those science fiction kind of head-mounted devices which you actually put on to have a look at virtual reality. So which year was the first head-mounted device built? Who said that? Incorrect. It's lower than that. It's less than that. Any guesses? So I've already given a hint that it's a year before 1978. And no Googles, please. 65? Incorrect. Now, in the interest of time, I'll close it off. And who said 1965? I'll give the Tim Tams to him because the answer is 1968. So who said 1965? Yes, can you please come up? Your name, please? Nick. Please give a round of applause to Nick. This question is important because it shows that VR has been around for that long. We are looking at almost about 50 years. So why is it now that we say that the time has come? Yes, everybody knows that the computing power is many-fold now. But the reality is that most of the big companies of the world today, whether you take it Samsung, Apple, Google, Amazon, everybody is pumping billions of dollars into this. There are use cases being identified every day. And that's the reason where we expect the tipping point to be happening within the next 3 years, and the debate will keep happening on and on and on, that has the tipping point happened or not, and it would have seen us past. These are some of the things or some of the points in time which have helped reach us the stage that we are. The significant was when Samsung launched Gear VR at $100. It was important because for two reasons. Number one, that enabled us to use our mobiles for getting a VR experience. Number two was that it brought within the cost of $100 US. Next was when Apple launched ARKit. Now, just to give you an imagine that Apple launched ARKit about 9 months back. There have already been 13 million downloads of ARKit. With the installed base of ARKit, it is a no-brainer that Apple ARKit will be a game changer. How many of you have played Pokemon Go? 1, 2. I must say this is statistically quite important because all over the world that I speak, I get a much higher percentage of people who played Pokemon Go. But just for your interest, that was a killer application for augmented reality. That was a game changer. After Apple launched ARKit, Google came out and launched AR Core. So with ARKit and AR Core, it's a no-brainer that in the years ahead, augmented reality will be very much part of our lives. Now let's look at what's happening in education and training and in VR and AR. There are 6 segments of the education and training market. Early childhood learning, schools, which is K to 12, vocational education and training, higher education, corporate learning, and lifelong learning. Out of these 6 segments, K to 12 and universities or higher education are the education component. Corporate learning, lifelong learning, and vocational education and training are the skills component. And early childhood learning is in a separate spot by itself. So here's again another question, another round of Tim Toms. 75% of take-up today of VR and AR is in gaming and entertainment. Can you tell me what percentage is the take-up in education and training? 5%? Incorrect. It's higher than that. Who said what? Can you speak a bit loudly and raise up your hand? 20%? Who said what? Who said 20%? Incorrect. It's higher. 20%? 30%? You are incorrect. It's lower than that. So it's between 20 and 30. Who said 25? Your name, please. Give Ira a round of applause. So after gaming and entertainment at 75%, education and training is the next highest take-up at 25%. But the difference is that training is ahead in take-up of VR, AR as compared to education. And just for your information, the next highest is industrial design, proof of concept, field servicing. These are typical functionalities which are now going in for VR, AR. And after that is health at 17%. Health is coming up in a very, very big way, both for mental and for physical rehab. So let's look at higher education, where we have bulk of the segment of our audience today. The biggest challenge at the moment is to get an environmental scan and to find out who's doing what in VR, AR in higher education. There are 4 areas typically where VR, AR is being used in higher education. Number 1 area is blending VR, AR with pedagogy, which is strictly in the domain of instructional designers, Department of Education in higher education. Number 2 is research, which is being carried out in VR, AR. Number 3 is education in VR, AR. Stuff like Unity, 3D modeling, UX, that kind of skills which are required for creating VR, AR. And number 4 is research, commercialization, and startups. Let's look at some examples of what's happening. Okay, how many Tim Tams left? 2, okay. So one more question. Which university had a class in virtual reality? And this happened in the year 2017. So you've got to tell me which university was it and what subject was it. So imagine this is a class where everybody had those head-mounted glasses going on, and they were actually learning through virtual reality. So you've got to name the subject and the university. Come on, guys. Okay, one hint in the interest of time. It was in North America. North America. It was. Incorrect. Incorrect. So we've ruled out Harvard and MIT. Howard? She already said, I said incorrect. Okay, another hint. It was in Canada. Toronto? Incorrect. Vancouver? But what? University of what? Incorrect. Incorrect. Let me tell you once again, this is a university which is based in Vancouver, but you got the name incorrect. Toronto is not Vancouver. That is correct. It was University of British Columbia, which had, your name please? Come, take your, so in 2017, University of British Columbia, please give them a round of applause. University of British Columbia had their first lecture in virtual reality, and they taught law. And it was really to look at or develop the offering for remote students. Although in this particular case, they were sitting in the classroom or close to where the presenter was, and they got full credits for that. So this is an example of where you are blending pedagogy with virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality. Now, examples of research. There are 2 classic examples that I can give you. One is using VR for pain management. This is currently happening, research on this is happening in University of Sydney. And what they're trying to work out is, what is the threshold level at which you can stop pain? And this entire experimentation is happening in virtual reality. And the second example over there is haptic feedback in virtual reality. This was something that I witnessed in the University of California at San Diego. If you were wearing a glove and you went into a virtual environment which had a piano, using the physical glove, you touched on the piano buttons, you got a sensation. Now, this is the kind of research activity which is currently happening. And this comes under the banner of haptic research, where you're getting haptic feedback. There's another example of learning Japanese in a mediated virtual environment. And this is once again happening at University of Sydney. So these are classic examples of some activity or some research which is happening in virtual reality. Now, these are examples of the third case that I gave you of education in virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality. So, University of California at Berkeley is at the moment conducting executive education courses which are targeted at senior executives. And these are a combination of business and technology. On the other hand, you've got University of California at San Diego, which is teaching people skills used for virtual reality and augmented reality. And they are partnering with edX, which is a joint venture between Harvard and MIT, to provide these skills online. So we have looked at 3 examples. One is in how you are blending pedagogy with technology. Second is research happening in VR, AR, XR. Third is education in VR, XR, and AR. Now, let's look at the 4th example, which is research, commercialization, and startups. Here we have 2 examples of a company called Palace, which has really been born out of research at University of Sydney, and which has now been commercialized into the form of developing scientific learning objects in virtual environment for school kids. The second example is of OVA, which is a company in Montreal in Canada, which is partnering with a whole lot of departments who are doing research in VR, AR, XR, and they are commercializing the research to take it to the products. So where to from now on? From here, I, in my role as global co-chair for the Virtual Reality, Augmented Reality Association, an association which has 50 chapters worldwide, we are trying to map the ecosystem. We are trying to find out what is happening or what different universities are doing in these emerging technologies. And the challenge is, when it comes to research activities, these are mostly funded by grants, and they tend to be localized in different parts of the universities, where even the other parts of the university don't know about. I'm also one of the founding members of IEEE Immersive Learning Special Interest Group. It's a global group, and where we are involved at the moment is in building standards, in looking at forecasting where the technology trends are, something which was being done by a group called Horizon Reports in the US, which has now gone bankrupt. So from an IEEE perspective, we are taking on the role to look at where will this technology be. And this is where I would welcome all of you to connect with me and look around you and see. It's really wonderful to see that we've got people from 25 countries over here, and really to find out what is happening in areas close to you in virtual reality, augmented reality, so that we can all share our experiences of the journey. We can look at what are the best practices. We can look at what are the lessons learned. In schools, we've looked at what is happening in higher education. Let's have a look at what's happening in schools. The example which is there on the screen at the moment is a classic example of where a school in New York State is using virtual reality as a way of augmenting learning by school students. Now, this lab that they have created, a VR lab, can give information about a range of subjects. So if a student wants to know something more about a particular subject, they can go into this lab, put in the requisite kind of keywords, and get a virtual experience. On the other hand, you've got very focused labs, which could be either chemistry labs, or which could be either physics labs, which are really helping students nowadays to learn these subjects in a very immersive manner, to make learning more engaged, and to get much higher learning outcomes. End of the day today, when we talk about STEM or STEAM, it is not so much the subjects that we are talking about, science, technology, engineering, and maths, but it is about the level of engagement that we are getting from the students. How are they really enjoying the learning activities, which makes a difference. Okay, so I've got one last Tim Tams left. So now the question is, there are regular surveys carried out in the Silicon Valley of the top 10 emerging skills. What number do you think AR, VR skills are in the recent survey among the top 10? So your answer can be only something in between 1 and 10. So who wants to make a guess? 1? Incorrect. Okay. What's your 4? Incorrect. 5? Incorrect. 8? Incorrect. There are only now 5, 6 numbers left now. 2? Incorrect. 7? Who said 7? Your name, please? Please give Nefita a round of applause. So, I was myself surprised when I saw this survey, because I also thought that possibly VR, AR would be number 1 and number 2, you know. But guess, and there was no, I finished my Tim Tams, but which was the number 1 skill? Can anybody in demand? Can anybody make a guess? Loudly? So anyway, in the interest of time, the number 1 skill was blockchain. Yep. Blockchain. 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 Bitcoin is an application of blockchain. So blockchain is the number 1 emerging technology skills required in the Bay Area at this particular point in time. So let me take it offline, and I will have a full session with you on blockchain. You know. So these are some of the other use cases in VR, AR, XR. Emirates Airlines, for example, is piloting glasses, smart glasses. And these smart glasses, what it does is, whatever information the airlines has about a passenger, that comes as an information overlay over the glasses, so that they're able to give a much more personalized service to the passengers. This example of a haptic glove I've already given you, but this is finding a lot of application in the health area. There are quite a few examples. This one over here gives you, there's a pen which is being developed at the moment by which you can write in the VR environment. You know. But classic, we are at a stage today where we are expanding the use case list of VR, AR. The next stage is really how do we convert those use cases into business cases. Because end of the day, for a wider adoption by the industry and academia, we have to come down to be clearly showcasing what is the ROI in financial terms. And there are examples currently going on with Amazon and with DHL, where they're looking at smart glasses with the overlay of information and really looking at how we can improve or enhance productivity. Now, I've finished with my Tim Tams. So last question is, as we go fast forward, what do you think? Will it be B2B, that is business to business, or will it be business to consumer, which will be really creating the tipping point for VR, AR? So B2B or B2C? That is business to consumer or business to business? Examples of gaming are typical examples of B2C. Examples of what Amazon is piloting, examples of what Emirates is piloting is in a way B2B. So what do you think is the future? Is it B2B or is it B2C? There's another question. Is it virtual reality or is it augmented reality which will have mass adoption in the future? So all forecasts are currently indicating that it will be B2B, that it will get taken up much more strongly by the business side and move away from purely gaming and entertainment. Also, at the moment, there is much higher take-up of virtual reality, but all future is indicating that it will be augmented reality because our brain responds much better to a real object for which virtual objects are added on. Now, yet another question. There's a company in US, a startup, which has raised $2 billion and has yet to come out with a product in the VR, AR domain. Can you name the company? So there's a company in the US which has raised $2 billion. It's making a lot of news in the virtual reality, augmented reality domain. Again, in the interest of time, I'll give you the answer. You may want to look it up later on. It's called Magic Leap. And Magic Leap does its magic and just collects billions of dollars. So that's showcasing what kind of interest is happening at the moment in VR, AR. How much time do we have? About time. So I will quickly run over what is the ecosystem for VR, AR. The ecosystem consists of hardware, the head-mounted devices that you see. It consists of software. It consists of apps. It consists of content. And it consists of platforms. Now, the hardware side is mostly the big players, which are people like Samsung, Sony PlayStation, Oculus, HTC, who are manufacturing the head-mounted devices. On the software side, you have the engines which are rendering into visual displays, and these are companies called Unity, Unreal. Two separate companies, examples of the engines which are rendering engines. Mobile apps is a very, very common example of number of players who are making mobile apps. When it comes to content, and content is what is most important to the educators. Currently, you are using video or a PDF. From PDF, the trend is going to video. And from video, the content is going to 360 video. And from 360 video to VR, AR. You can get cameras as low as $200 to get 360 photo shoots. So the interesting bit about the content is that it's all about storytelling. So you find a lot of people from film production background who are now moving into content production for education. There are some people who are moving from a pedagogy perspective, some people moving from a technology perspective. So this gives you an overview of what the AR, VR ecosystem is. And rest assured that you are going to be very much immersed into it within the next 3 years. So with this, I will end my presentation and happy to take any questions. I've already asked quite a few questions, so we're still happy to take any questions if there are any from the audience. You know. If not, then feel free to connect with me. These are my contact details. Yes, please. I could see a hand going up. Was there a question? Oh, yes, please. Yeah.
I was very interested to hear you say that in the next 3 years we'll know a lot about augmented reality in education. And I'm thinking of this because we recently did a survey at my university on the use of blended learning. We knew there were pockets of people that were very committed to enhancing the teaching and learning program through online, computer, etc. But we wanted to find out the types of blended learning that we used and how much it was used. And what we found was very interesting. There's a lot of blended learning being used, but when we analysed the types of blended learning that were being used, they were more to facilitate, to run more efficiently the teaching and learning program rather than to engage the students and facilitate their deeper understanding, their creative thinking and so on. So it just seems to me that there's a long way to go in a short time to move from blended learning, you know, really enhancing and making teaching and learning programs run efficiently, to augmented learning actually being implicated or integrated into the teaching and learning program. I'm wondering if you could explain how it's going to speed up so much.
So you've actually highlighted a couple of very interesting points, and you're absolutely spot on. When online learning first started off in a big way through MOOCs, one of the biggest hit was on engagement. The dropout rates were almost as high as 80% and so on and so forth. That gave rise to blended learning, and it's been all about blended learning from there onwards, basically to try and get that level of engagement, because it was very difficult to get that engagement in an online environment. Now, you have to literally experience virtual reality or augmented reality to understand the kind of emotion it has. See, when you are in those environments, you don't have your mobile phone, ringing, or your Facebook messages coming and all that kind of a thing. The engagement levels are very high. At the moment, what question that I'm being asked in conferences all over the world is, are there any data points to substantiate that VR, AR is actually enhancing learning engagement? How do you measure the learning engagement? What about learning outcomes? How do you correlate that if the performance of the students has gone up from X to Y, is it due to VR, AR, or because of some other factors? So we have now fully engaged with a number of people or academicians who are focused on to education research to look at these parameters, to collect the data points so that which will be helpful in making business cases, or even because end of the day, academics work on grants, and if they want more money, they have to make a business case, that it is going to either enhance, what better outcomes. So to answer your question, when you go in a blended learning environment, it's really about how do you move from content from a video to AR, VR. So from that perspective, we are also talking to global LMS providers to see how we can, get AR, VR content within the online learning platform. Does that answer your question? Yes, please.
I'm Dr. Afifa Khanam from Pakistan. It's very interesting to hear about this virtual reality and augmented reality, because we have already experiencing virtual education like distance education
Yes.
and blended.
Yes.
But the thing is that you have said that human mind captures the augmented reality more brilliantly than the virtual reality.
Yes.
So if in developing countries we go for a future with lot of money, with lot of technology and many effort, and then finally we can be imagine that human beings are learning more in augmented reality, then what is the future of this virtual reality in all of the world? Because still a few of universities are working on this concept.
So that's a very, very good point. I mean, I suppose that comes down to all the future trends and emerging technologies. Which kind of a world are we living in? And this also gets into, you see, virtual reality, for example, has a whole lot of downsides also. While there is a lot of immersion, but there is also a sense of isolation because you are virtually in an environment by yourself. So a lot of work is now being done about collaborating in a virtual environment or in an augmented reality environment. Second is, let me give you another statistic, that today you hear about 4K resolution, you see TV sets with 4K resolution and so on and so forth. Now we are talking about 8K coming on board. But 16K is where virtual reality becomes reality. When your eye does not differentiate between VR and AR. So to my mind, being a futurist is a very mug's game because I can't even see 1 year out, leave us at 5 years or 10 years. But the concept of singularity was when machine intelligence overtakes human intelligence. That year was defined as 1945. Sorry, not 1940, 2045. That has now been brought forward to 2030. And the way at which this work is happening in, I am so deep into it, but even for me, it is so difficult to keep track of what is happening over here. What about other people? So it's a very fundamental question that you see, which world are we heading into? Is this a world of science fiction? I don't know the answer myself. And anybody that I speak to futurists all the time. It's a very, very difficult question. So it's a very good question. Yes, please. You want to? Last question.
Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon to all of you, especially Prof. I am as a trainer myself at a very, I'm involved in training to teachers. Actually, I'm in love with the idea of AR, gamification, all those stuff, because I think that it will touch our 5 senses, all the 4 senses, but not, of course, not sense of smell. But I do believe that actually it takes years to really how are we going to address all these ideas into reality, because I think it's going to involve a lot of money. And the key idea is that we need to make sure that all teachers are well equipped with the latest knowledge. And I'm not sure whether all of us here are convinced how AR is going to really help teachers in the classroom, because it takes years to really put things in places.
So there are 3 important points that you made. Number 1 was that it takes us as human beings a lot of time to adjust to any new technology. Number 2 is that all teachers will not necessarily, take it on immediately kind of a stuff. They will take their own time. And number 3 is that you think that this entire process will take time. Now let me answer each one of them separately. Let's look at the first one, which was about, as human beings, we don't take technology very easily. Now when you look at the profile of the population, you get different types of people. Some are, technology adopters who will always take the lead in trying out further. And there is a whole lot of different kind of theories available about, adoption curves. This is what the hype cycle is and where it peaks and all that. So there is no doubt that these things will take years to happen. But imagine that VR has been around for 50 years. So it's not that people are not aware of what VR is. It's yes. The challenge though is that the rate of adoption now is becoming very fast. So whether we like it or we don't like it, we will get into an environment where this will get forced upon. I'll give you an example. I was speaking at a conference in New Delhi about 18 months back on VR, AR in education, and there was an education secretary from one of the states who came up to me. He said that I want to know more about VR, AR because I don't have money to build the labs. Can I create, labs in physics, chemistry, and make it easier for my kids to get education? Now there'll be a whole lot of, there'll be from a quality perspective, there'll be from a cost perspective, there'll be take-ups and pressures happening, Other thing is that at the moment there are a whole lot of challenges, you can't watch a VR content for too long because your brain, doesn't accept that content at that resolution level. So you start getting nausea and all that kind of stuff. At the same time, what you find is that the cost points are still very high, but the way things are happening, these barriers are coming down very fast. And the last point is that different points or different parts of the world are at different stages of globalization and digitization. I live in Australia. In Australia, print media is dead. Nobody buys newspaper, But I travel all over the world, and there are parts of the world where print media is actually growing by 7 to 8%, So there are different kind of things which are floating around in different parts. You go to China, there are 525 million smartphones, You go to India, there are 1 billion mobile phones. When you go to Indonesia, Indonesia now generates 4% of all tweets. So you find that there are different dynamics kind of coexisting. The take-up rates are going to be different for different parts. So there is no single answer for that, But yes, I'm not for one saying that you should take it. I am kind of only making you across that this trend is happening and this is likely to accelerate in the times to come. And from a professional development perspective, I would only urge that people take upon this because digital literacy of the teachers is a big issue worldwide, purely because we find that the digital natives are much more savvy than us in understanding technology. So these are issues which are clearly identified and are important from professional development of a teacher. So that's what I would respond, Okay, so in the interest of time, I have to wind up, but feel free to connect up with me. I'm looking forward to building the network so that we are able to look at what is happening in different parts of the world in AR, VR, in education. And yes, look forward to connecting with all of you, So thank you once again.
That has been very interesting from Professor Pradip Khanna. And bear with me that the options of realities that you have presented are all mind-boggling. But the next reality is for us to have our lunch. Exactly. I now hand over to our Mr. Sramoni. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shari Abdul Rahman, for moderating this session, and of course, to our honorable keynote speaker, Professor Pradip Khanna, for another informative and beneficial sharing session just now. Dr. Shari Abdul Rahman and Professor Pradip Khanna are to remain on stage for a memento presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite Dr. Sazali Yusof, Director of Institute of Teacher Education, Tuanku Bainun, Kampus.